Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to join this moment in which we're introducing the Equality Act of 2015. It's fitting that we come together in this room, a room named after President Lyndon Johnson, who 51 years ago this month signed into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a law which he said would, and I quote, promote a more abiding commitment to freedom, a more constant pursuit of justice, and a deeper respect of human dignity. It was a turning point in our history when we as a nation challenge unjust laws and destructive prejudices and choose to advance basic civil rights, to, as in the vision of Dr. Martin Luther King, bend the arc of the moral universe towards justice. For more than 2 centuries, this has been our nation's most sacred charge, to build a more perfect union. Step by step, stride by stride, the barriers that once prevented people from enjoying the full measures of liberty and of dignity have broken down. But as you know, there's much more to be done to secure that reality for each and every American. In this country, we believe that all of us are created equal, that we have certain unalienable rights. Yet today, many of our citizens do not receive equal treatment, and they do not receive equal rights, not because of anything that they have done, but because of who they are: lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. There's no question that we have made great progress in advancing the rights of the LGBT community. But as long as people are afraid to put their spouse's photo on their desk at work, as long as they're worried about it being evicted from their apartment if they don't pretend to be just roommates, we've got a lot of work to do. The harsh reality is that in far too many states, there are still no laws explicitly prohibiting discrimination against LGBT Americans. This means that while same-sex couples can today legally marry, tomorrow they could lose their jobs, be kicked out of a restaurant, or turned down for a mortgage, just because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. The time has come to right this wrong. The time has come for us as a nation to be bolder and better in ensuring full rights and full equality for our LGBT brothers and sisters. The comprehensive bipartisan legislation that we are presenting today, David Cicilline leading in the House, its partnership with John Lewis, and in the Senate, a partnership with Tammy Baldwin and Cory Booker, and more than 100 other members of the House and Senate. This comprehensive bipartisan legislation that we will introduce together today will usher in uniform federal standards to protect all LGBT Americans from discrimination in housing, in workplaces, in schools, in public accommodations, and financial transactions. It will close long-standing gaps in legal protections against sex discrimination as well, ensuring that women are treated equally in all aspects of their lives. Discrimination has no place in our nation's laws. If it's wrong in marriage, it is wrong in employment. If it's wrong in employment, it is wrong in housing. If it's wrong in housing, it's wrong in education and jury duty and mortgages. Put simply, people deserve to live free from fear, free from violence, and free from discrimination, regardless of who they are or whom they love. Writing these protections into the law will bring us a significant stride forward in our nation's long march towards inclusion, equality, and opportunity, and will extend the full promise of America to every American. Here with us today, we have individuals who have experienced the discrimination firsthand, and they will be talking about that. We will have these folks stepping forward, but let me give you a sense of how we'll proceed. First, David Cicilline, who has led this effort in partnership with John Lewis in the House, will speak, followed by Tammy Baldwin, John Lewis, and Cory Booker. Then we will have leadership from the 2 houses. of the Democratic leadership, and then we'll turn to these families, and then we will turn to additional individuals, representing interest groups that have been key parts of preparing for this day, and other members of Congress who have been important voices and will make their voice heard today. So it is a bit of a lineup, but it reflects the importance of what we're addressing. And with that, Congressman David Cicilline, and it's been wonderful to work in partnership with you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you. Good morning. I want to begin by thanking Senator Jeff Merkley for all of his work and for leading the fight here in the United States Senate. It has been great working together over these many months on this legislation, and I'm really proud to be partnering with him on this effort. I also want to acknowledge Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi, who has been a giant in the struggle for equality, and we'll hear from her in a moment. As well as our Democratic whip, Steny Hoyer, Congressman John Lewis, an American icon and a relentless and passionate fighter for civil rights, my colleagues in the LGBT Equality Caucus, and all of my House colleagues, many of whom have already signed on to be original co-sponsors of the bill, for all of their assistance in preparing this legislation for introduction today. Thank you to Krista and Jamie Contreras, Carter Brown, and Luke Peterson for the courage and grace that you have shown in the face of discrimination, and for joining us today to share your stories. And of course, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the incredible support that we received from so many important LGBT advocates and organizations in this room and all across this country to make sure that we got this bill right. Thank you especially to Chad Griffin, Winnie Stackelberg, Mara Kiesling for standing shoulder to shoulder with us in this work. I also want to thank the members of my staff for all of their work, especially Sarah Trister, who devoted so much to this effort. Last month, the Supreme Court of the United States held that LGBT Americans are entitled to the same marriage rights and responsibilities of all other Americans. And while this is important and historic progress toward full equality, there's much work left to do. Today, in most states, an LGBT person can get married on Saturday, post photos of their wedding on Sunday, and they get fired from their job or thrown out of their apartment on Monday just because of who they are. Today, in most states, it's still legal to discriminate against LGBT Americans in the areas of employment, housing, public accommodations, education, or other core areas of day-to-day life. This is completely wrong. Americans do not support discrimination. Fairness and equality are core American values and part of the very reason for our nation's founding. And it's critical that we affirm these values by passing a bill that guarantees LGBT Americans the same rights and protections as all other Americans. And I'm proud to announce that our introduction today of the Equality Act in the House of Representatives will include 155 original co-sponsors. And I'm grateful. And I'm very grateful to my colleagues in the House for this very strong showing of support for its first day of introduction. The Equality Act is a common sense piece of legislation that gets to the core issue of equality by expanding the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and other existing laws to ensure that LGBT Americans can live their lives free from discrimination. Specifically, it will prohibit discrimination in public accommodations, federal funding, education, employment, housing, credit, and jury service, core areas of day-to-day life where it is currently legal in many states to discriminate against LGBT Americans. Some might wonder why we're taking this approach, to introduce a comprehensive anti-discrimination bill, rather than the approach that we've taken in years past with ENDA and other piecemeal bills that would ban discrimination in one area or another. The answer is that our country is in a different place today, and momentum is on our side. Just 10 years ago, the United States Senate came within a dozen votes of passing a constitutional amendment to discriminate against same-sex couples. But today, public support for marriage equality and equal rights under law is stronger than ever. Partial equality is not acceptable. It's time for a comprehensive bill that protects LGBT Americans from discrimination in all aspects of everyday life. And discrimination against LGBT Americans is real. And every day, millions of LGBT people face the danger of losing their jobs, being kicked out of their homes, or being denied service. Don't take my word for it. Here are the facts. 63% of LGBT Americans report having experienced discrimination at some point in their lives. 56% of lesbian, gay, bisexual people have experienced discrimination when trying to get health care. and 70% of transgender Americans report the same. 82% of LGBT students report that they've been verbally harassed, 38% have been physically harassed, and 64% have felt unsafe at school because of their sexual orientation. These figures are staggering. The current system, this patchwork of protections and lack of protections for the LGBT community in our states is not working. Discrimination, bigotry, and intolerance should have no place in the United States of America in 2015. And it's time for Congress to stand up and prohibit discrimination against someone because they're lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. I want to close by noting just how humbling it is to be standing here today with all of these great colleagues to introduce the Equality Act in this room, the LGBT room, named for the country's 34th president, Lyndon Johnson, who signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law. In November of 1963, just days after he took office, President Johnson addressed our nation and promised that he would continue the work President Kennedy started to fight for full equality. President Johnson told the nation, and I quote, "We have talked long enough in this country about equal rights. We've talked for more than 100 years. It's time now to write the next chapter and to write it into the books of law." My friends, the time has come for us to stop talking about full equality for the LGBT community and start writing the next chapter in the books of law. I look forward to our work both in the House and the Senate. Thank all of my colleagues, and now very pleased to turn things over to my colleague in the Senate, the outstanding Senator Tammy Baldwin.
Well, one thing is clear. A growing number of Americans believe that their LGBT family members, friends, and neighbors deserve to be treated like everyone else in the United States of America. Yet, as we will hear a little bit later this afternoon in powerful stories of discrimination, that is not a reality today in our country. Now, after an historic Supreme Court decision on marriage equality, I believe America is ready to take more steps forward. Today in America, 31 states lack complete protections for LGBT Americans, and so they live in states without fully inclusive non-discrimination laws. In a majority of American states, LGBT Americans do not have the freedom of full equality. It's now time to take historic legislative action at the federal level and pass on to the next generation an America that is more equal, not less. No American should be at risk of being fired, evicted from their home, or denied services because of who they are or who they love. We need to ensure that all employees are hired, fired, or promoted based on their performance, their work ethic, their character, their skills, their talents, and not on their sexual orientation or gender identity. We also need to make sure that every American has a fair chance to earn a living and provide for their families, including LGBT Americans. The introduction of this legislation marks an important step forward, an historic step forward for our country. It marks a reaffirmation of our nation's founding belief that all Americans are created equal under the law. It's about fairness, about whether gay and lesbian Americans deserve to be treated just like everyone else. It's about opportunity, about whether every American gets to dream the same dreams, chase the same ambitions, and have the same shot at success. And it's about freedom, the freedom to realize the American promise of full equality. Next, please welcome Congressman John Lewis, our hero.
Thank you, Senator. I want to thank all of my colleagues for being here from the Senate and from the House, and especially our leader, our Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. Thank you. I would like to applaud my colleagues, my friends, my brothers and sisters for introducing the Equality Act. This legislation is what justice requires. This legislation is what justice demands. And like the recent Supreme Court decision, it is long overdue. I first came to Washington in 1961, 21 years old, the same year that President Barack Obama was born. I was a few pounds lighter, and I had all of my hair. I joined a small group like Krista, Jamie, Carter, and Luke, and we boarded a Greyhound bus headed south. Just think, in 1961, black people and white people couldn't board a Greyhound bus together here in Washington, D.C., be seated together and travel through Virginia, through North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, on our way to New Orleans to test a decision of the United States Supreme Court. We believe then, as we do now, that we are a society committed to the concept of equal justice under the law. No longer should America turn her back on our lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender brothers and sisters. I said it in the past, and I say it again. We fought too hard and too long against discrimination based on race and color, not to stand up against discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity.
Wow. All right.
I believe in my heart of hearts that we must come together to truly create one nation, one people, one family, one house, the American house, the people's house, a country that is free of hate, free of fear, and committed to love, understanding, and respect for the dignity and the worth of every human being. That is our calling. That our mission, it is our mission. Let's pass the legislation and do the right thing. May I present Senator Booker, my friend, my brother. Thank you, Senator.
It is an honor to stand here today with an extraordinary group of my colleagues, and dozens of others are not represented here. I want to thank especially the leadership of Senator Merkley. I want to thank the leadership of Congressman Cicilline. I want to thank my partner, Tammy Baldwin, and I especially want to thank a hero in my life, Representative John Lewis. This legislation that we are introducing is something that resonates with the best of who we are as a nation. But the need for this legislation reflects the worst of who we are. Langston Hughes said it simply, that there's a dream in this land with its back against the wall. To save the dream for one, we must save the dream for all. This nation, this great country, cannot celebrate ideals of liberty and freedom and equality if that is not the truth for every American citizen. We have no equal citizenship rights right now in this nation. When a gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender American can be denied equality in housing, denied justice at their job, denied equality under the law. Justice delayed is justice denied. Some citizenship rights equals to no full citizenship rights. Some equality is still inequality. It is time we be who we say we are when we all make that pledge to our nation that we are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Make no mistake, this day is not simply a day to recognize a victory. This is a beginning. We have a hard road ahead of us. American history is replete with a testimony that the rights of Americans, women, African Americans, Latinos, religious freedoms, that those are not accomplished easily. It takes struggle. Today, we ignite a clarion call for justice throughout America. We ignite a clarion call for all those of good conscience who know that we cannot be a nation where hatred and bigotry is institutionalized by law, institutionalized in our states, that runs deep into our neighborhoods and our communities. It is time that we continue the march towards freedom. Make no mistake, I am here today as the 4th popularly elected senator in the history of this country, not because of the struggles of Black Americans, not because of the struggles of white Americans, but my freedoms and liberties were fought for by all Americans, Black and white, gay and straight, stood for me and fought for me and for the cause of freedom and justice. Well, this cause endures today, and we all must join hands together and make a commitment to this struggle, a commitment to this fight, that the laws of this American land will reflect that greatest of all American spirits, that we will be one nation, that we will be a place of liberty and justice, that we will be, as is said on the walls of our Supreme Court, a nation with equal justice under the law. Thank you. I now have a very, very great privilege. I think this might be the first time I had this opportunity in my life to introduce an extraordinary leader, a woman of righteous courage, House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a good afternoon it is. Here we stand in this historic Capitol building. On the wall looking down from us is President Lyndon Johnson, who signed and fought for the Civil Rights Bill, as well as the Civil Rights Act, as well as Voting Rights Act, Medicare, Medicaid, many anniversaries this year. Out the window, we see the Supreme Court in full view from where we stand. And as Senator Booker said, engraved on its walls is the vision of America. In this room, we stand with an icon of ending discrimination and promoting liberty and justice for all, John Lewis. Also in this room, we have the voice of the future, this little child, this beautiful little child with their moms, with their moms. And we are here to put forth historic legislation because of the leadership in the House of David Cicilline, aided by Jared Polis. I got over 150 co-sponsors in a matter of hours. It was quite remarkable, and we thank them for their leadership, and we thank Senator Merkley for his leadership in the United States Senate. Thank you, Senator Merkley, for your leadership. But all of the inside maneuvering that is done would not be successful or possible without the outside mobilization. And for that, I want to thank Chad Griffin, Winnie Stackelberg, Mara Kiesling for their leadership. Thank you for helping to make this day possible. And pretty soon, we're going to be hearing from the real stars of the day when we hear from our guests, Krista and Jamie Contreras, Carter Brown, and Luke Peterson. They're what we're here about. But I want to associate myself, in the interest of time, associate myself with the remarks of all who have gone before me. That's pretty presumptuous because they were pretty great. Senator Booker right before me, Senator and John Lewis before him, and Tammy, and our two lead sponsors. But I want to add this because we're talking about history and where we stand in our perspective and how we got here. It hasn't been that long ago when we passed in the Congress the hate crimes legislation, fully inclusive hate crimes legislation. That was step one, and it was a big step. And then we had the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, with the help of President Obama taking the lead, and we salute him for his courage and leadership there. And then the court, the marriage equality. We had 4 issues. Again, hate crimes, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, ENDA, and marriage equality. Well, the court and the public took care of the marriage equality issue, but more work needs to be done. And so it was time for ENDA. And we looked at ENDA and thought, most people thought there wasn't discrimination in the workplace against LGBT people. They didn't think so. Well, because we live in California, so. But then when we went to address that issue, David and Jared and others, and Jeff and Tammy and others, and friends outside said, wait a minute, there is no place for discrimination in America, not in employment, not in housing, not in transportation, not in healthcare, not in any subject that you can name, because we live in America. And as other speakers have said in their book, or most recently, with liberty and justice for all. We pledge allegiance to that every day. We pledge allegiance, liberty and justice for all. For all. And our founders, when we take that pledge and when we honor it, we honor the vows of our founders who pledged life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all Americans. So what we are doing here today is very patriotic, it's very American, and it's a proud day for all of us who have been engaged in this fight for a long time to see what people call now the rapid process. Like a star is born, the LGBT community, which has been fighting the fight for many, many years. So thank all of you, have borne the pain, who have fought the fight, and now hopefully savor the victory. And I just want to add one more thing. This legislation is very good. It has very strong protections for women in it. So for many reasons, this is a cause for celebration. And now would have been my privilege to introduce Senator Schumer, who's been with us all the way on this issue, but his leadership responsibilities called him away. So now we will turn to Mr. Cicilline. Oh, to Steny. Steny? Okay. They've skipped over something. Now really a champion on these LGBT issues for a very long time in the Congress of the United States and even before. The House Democratic Whip, Steny Hoyer.
Senator Merkley, Dave Cicilline, John Lewis, Tammy Baldwin, so many heroes of civil rights, equal rights. I too will adopt all of the comments that were made before. So I thought, what perspective could I add to this conference, which has had so many extraordinary leaders on behalf of the rights of all Americans, from the 50s to the present day. I've been in Congress for some years, 34 years to be exact. The AIDS epidemic in the early 80s and into the 80s caused a crisis of health care in America. But there were some in America who thought that it was an opportunity to discriminate against those who became sick. And President Reagan was asked at a press conference, what do you think about discriminating against those with AIDS? And Ronald Reagan's answer was, I don't believe in discrimination against anybody. Next question. That's what this bill says. This bill says that America will mean what it has said through the centuries. We are having an issue today and a tragedy that occurred just a few weeks ago about those who would divide our country and symbols of that division. This is about bringing us together. This is about making sure that that young girl, boy, girl, baby, young baby. It is a young baby, I could tell that. This is about making sure that that little girl grows up in a country that will treat her on the basis of the content of her character. I am so proud to be associated with all of these individuals who, before they came to the Congress and in their service in the Congress, represent the best of what America needs to be. And now let me introduce the next speaker. So the senator tells me I'll introduce them. And so, in awe of all senators as we House members are, I will introduce somebody who's been here for such a short time, Senator Merkley.
So now we're going to hear from folks who have been directly affected by discrimination. We're starting with Krista and Jamie Contreras, a Michigan couple whose baby was denied care by a medical doctor because of the baby's parents' status as an LGBT couple. Thank you so much for coming to share your story today.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Krista Contreras. This is my wife, Jamie Contreras, and our daughter, Bay. 9 months ago, Jamie and I received the ultimate gift when I gave birth to our beautiful baby girl. Stealing the show like she always does. Like most parents, we were excited, nervous, and certainly made sure that we were very prepared. We decorated the nursery, we picked out the perfect name, and as one of our first big decisions as soon-to-be parents, we interviewed several pediatricians to ensure we had the best fit for our family. So when Bay was 6 days old, we loaded her up for our first big trip out of the house, and we went to see our hand-picked pediatrician. When we got there, we took Bay out of her car seat, and we and we waited anxiously for our doctor to come into the room. But she never showed up. Eventually, another doctor came in, and she told us that she would be our pediatrician, and that, and she continued to move forward with the checkup. When we asked why, we were told that our doctor had preyed on it and that she couldn't treat our daughter.
We were obviously shocked. We were heartbroken, we were humiliated when we found out that our hand-picked pediatrician wouldn't care for our daughter simply because Krista and I are gay. Our child, our daughter, Bay, deserves access to the same resources as every other child. Having two moms should not impact whether a doctor will treat her or not. Without clear nationwide protections, too many LGBT families like our own have to live in constant fear that discrimination is lurking around the next corner. And for many, it is. The Supreme Court has acted on marriage, but now LGBT families like our own need Congress to act and to protect all Americans from discrimination. The Equality Act will ensure that parents like us have the protections we need for our families, to raise our children and to live free of fear. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Krista and Jamie and Bay, for sharing your story. Carter Brown is here from Texas. Carter was fired from his job in the real estate industry when he was outed as transgender at work by a colleague. Thank you so much, Carter, for coming to share your story.
Good afternoon. I'm Carter Brown, and I'm here from Dallas, Texas. In my home state of Texas, my daily life was once like most Americans. Like you, I generally began my day by dressing for work, kissing my family goodbye before heading out into rush hour traffic. In the workplace, I made effort for good attendance, got along well with colleagues, and energetically applied myself to my job duties. I soon became the top producer in my office on a consistent basis, earning me 3 promotions within a 2 years' time, and I advanced into a 6-figure salary income. Having more than 10 years' experience in the real estate industry, I took great pride in my career accomplishments, and even greater pride in the ability to work hard and provide a decent living for myself and my family. Until the day that a mere office gossip diluted my years of hard work and dedication to the job and drastically changed my life. This particular day started no differently. I dressed for work, I kissed my family goodbye, and I headed out into rush hour traffic. But when I arrived at the office, a colleague surprisingly confronted me with news that everyone was told that I was a transgender man. The following 3 weeks created high anxiety and pure turmoil for me as I encountered a series of discriminatory and harassing interactions with colleagues, managerial staff, and even the human resources department. This swiftly led up to my termination, which was lawfully justified simply because Texas has no legal protections against discrimination based on gender identity. Sadly, my story isn't very unique. My story is only one story of the nearly 2/3 of LGBT Americans polled by the HRC that have shared similar experiences of discrimination. My story is only one of thousands of Americans that are unemployed or underemployed specifically and simply because of their gender identity or their sexual orientation. My voice is only one in representation of a complete population that is, has been, or will be denied housing and public services specifically and simply because of their gender identity or sexual orientation. It is alarming and appalling that citizens in 31 states lack fully inclusive discrimination policies. All Americans need permanent, explicit non-discrimination laws to be in place and enforced, because the absence of these legal protections not only affect hardworking transgender citizens and same-gender-loving people, it subsequently affects the livelihood of thousands of American families. I know that our society may not all share the same values, but I believe that everyone should be valued and have full opportunity to work hard and earn a decent income for themselves and their families. That is why I fully support the Equality Act, because having equal opportunity should not be a matter of sex or gender. For many people, it is a matter of survival. Thank you for your time.
Carter, well done, and thank you so much for sharing your story. And now Luke Peterson is here from Nebraska, who was fired when his boyfriend visited him at work. Luke, thank you for coming today.
Hi, my name is Luke Peterson. I'm a proud Nebraskan through and through. I'm also a gay man, and because of that, I've lost 3 jobs in my life. Let me say that again. I've lost 3 jobs simply because of my sexual orientation in the home state that I love so dearly. The great state of Nebraska is one of 31 states that lack fully inclusive LGBT non-discrimination protections. That means I could lose my apartment or be at risk of losing my job, refuse service at a restaurant or a movie theater, all because of my sexual orientation. And that is why I'm here today. Let me tell you a story. My senior year in college, I worked at a little wine shop in town in Lincoln, Nebraska. My family, I was born and raised on a farm, had been selling and producing their own wine when I was 16, and with a surplus of grapes going to a nearby vineyard, so naturally I was perfect for the job. In fact, the manager hired me on the spot, and I was happy there, working 9 months so then I could pay my student loan bills when I graduated. However, my then boyfriend came to visit. He hadn't seen the store before and was interested to see where I'd be spending so much of my time. When I called the store the next day to schedule my hours, they told me that they didn't need me, and they stopped answering my phone calls and my emails altogether. I never worked there again, and I've never heard a response. I'm not asking for special treatment. In fact, I'm not asking for anything other than to be treated like any other of my coworkers, family, or friends, all of whom are protected from discrimination in the workplace, classroom, or at home in public places under federal law. I want to work, learn, live, and take care of my family without the risk of discrimination based on who I am or whom I love. And that is why I'm here today, to share just why the Equality Act means so much to me and to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Americans all across the country. Everyone deserves a chance to succeed or fail on their own merits, and everyone, including gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender people, should have a fair chance to earn a living and provide for their families. So many states have state-level non-discrimination protections passed by Democrats and Republicans because it's simply the right thing to do. Now it's the federal government's turn. Leaders in this room and across the country have taken a stand on behalf of equality and fairness. Now it's time for all of us to do the same. Thank you.
David is going to jump in here and introduce all of our partners who have been so fabulous in bringing us to this point and working together. And looking forward to working with them going forward. I just want to say my own thanks to them, but I also want to announce that in the Senate, we have 40 original co-sponsors.
Thank you, Jeff. As the Democratic leader mentioned, the outside organizations and advocates have been a really important part of this process and will continue to be a very important part of this process as we continue to fight for passage of this bill. I'd like to begin with introducing Chad Griffin, the president of the Human Rights Campaign. These organizations are well known to you, so I won't speak a long time, but just to say that Chad has been a really important part of this process, as has HRC, and just want to thank you, Chad, and invite you up.
Thank you so much, Congressman. First of all, I want to join in all the thanks, and thanks Leader Pelosi for helping to get us to this point and leading so many of us to where we are on these important issues. I also want to thank Senators Merkley, Baldwin, and Booker, who've been true champions in the Senate along with so many of their colleagues, as well as Congressman Cicilline and our true hero, Congressman John Lewis, who inspires us all on a daily basis. I'd also like to thank Carter, Luke, Krista, and Jamie for sharing their stories today. Their stories and countless other stories of discrimination against LGBT people from all across this country are exactly why we are all here today and why the Equality Act is so essential. Because even with a nationwide marriage victory in all 50 states, in most states in this country still today, a couple who gets married at 10 a.m. is still at risk of being fired from their jobs by noon and evicted from their home by 2, all in the same day, simply for posting that wedding photo on Facebook. This is fundamentally wrong, and it needs to change. And it's also important to note that a bipartisan majority of Americans, as well as leading American companies, all agree and support the Equality Act. The Equality Act will once and for all end the unacceptable patchwork, that crazy quilt of non-discrimination laws across this country that threaten the livelihood of LGBT Americans, including many of those very same couples who fought so long and so hard to have their marriages recognized. Folks like Carter, Luke, Krista, and Jamie, and millions of others in communities across this nation. LGBT people who are doctors, veterans, firefighters, teachers, our family, and our neighbors. They should have a fair chance to earn a living, to provide for their families, and to live their lives without fear of discrimination. And at its core, that's what the Equality Act is all about. The time has come in this nation for full federal equality, nothing more and nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. I would next like to invite Winnie Stackelberg, who is the Executive Vice President for the Center for American Progress, another really important partner in this coalition.
Hello, my name is Winnie Stackelberg, and I work at the Center for American Progress. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Senators Merkley, Baldwin, and Booker. I want to thank Congressman Cicilline. I want to thank members of the House Equality Caucus, Leader Pelosi, Congressman Steny Hoyer, Senator Schumer, and Representative John Lewis for your incredible partnership and unwavering support for LGBT equality. Grant, Luke, Krista, and Jamie, your bravery and courage, your storytelling is essential to this effort. Today, we embark on the next chapter in our fight for equality for all Americans. Because of the big hearts and open minds of Americans of all backgrounds and the quiet courage of LGBT people and families, we find ourselves at an historic moment. And yet, despite how far we've come, we cannot mistake our progress for victory. While marriage equality is the law of the land nationwide, a majority of states still lack clear protections from discrimination for LGBT people. This paradox is indefensible, unsustainable, and runs contrary to our values as a country. The discrimination faced by LGBT Americans is not hypothetical, as you've heard today. This is a national problem that needs a national solution, and the Equality Act is that solution. The only way for LGBT Americans to have the same protections as other Americans in all parts of life is for Congress to act, and to act now. The Equality Act is about where we want to go as a country. It not only provides protections for LGBT Americans, but also expands and enhances existing non-discrimination protections for people of color, women, and people of all faiths. For Americans of every ideology, but particularly for progressives, the Equality Act is a priority moving forward. As progressives, we at CAP understand the need to work at the intersections of issues and communities, reinforcing shared values and common interests. And we at the Center for American Progress commit to that approach as we advocate for comprehensive protections for LGBT Americans. Make no mistake about it, the Equality Act is not a symbolic piece of legislation. This is not a vision bill. It's not a message bill. It's not a marker bill. The Equality Act is the bill that the LGBT community is calling for. It is the bill that we need. 40 years ago, Bella Abzug introduced the first Equality Act, and last night I heard from Bella Abzug's daughter, Liz. She said, 40 years later, after my bold and incredible mom introduced the first Equality Act, we'll complete the job. When we pass this legislation, and we will pass it, the Equality Act will be remembered as our nation's biggest step forward for lesbian, gay, and bisexual Americans. Thank you very much.
It is now my pleasure to invite Mara Kiesling, who is the Executive Director of the National Center for Transgender Equality, forward to, again, a very important part of the coalition. Welcome, Mara.
Thank you, Congressman. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mara Kiesling. I'm the Executive Director of the National Center for Transgender Equality. And if I could take a minute to say to trans people that I'm the second trans person today standing here at a microphone in the LBJ room of the United States Senate with dozens of members of Congress around me. When I came to Washington 15 years ago, this would not have happened. It would not have been possible, and it would not have been allowed. I'm so honored to be here today, and I'm so thankful to Congressman Cicilline and Senator Merkley and all of the sponsors and all of the members who came here today. There have been dozens of people here, and that has been an amazing thing. Thank you to the folks who came, and my friend Carter Brown. It's just amazing. I could tell you about all the statistics we know. We know transgender people every day face disrespect, discrimination, and violence. I could tell you that our surveys have shown that 90% of us have faced discrimination at work, 19% of us have been homeless. But I want to tell you about something that every transgender person in the country knows. This Monday, 25-year-old India Clark was found murdered in Tampa, Florida. She was a 25-year-old who couldn't find what she called a regular job. So she went to cosmetology school where she didn't feel safe because she was transgender. She did face job discrimination. She did face educational discrimination, and I'm sure she's faced a lot of the other discrimination that the Equality Act would help eradicate. There is a tight connection between the disrespect, the discrimination, and the violence we face. And this act is aimed at really helping with the discrimination part. It is so vital to trans people. It is vital as a legal remedy when we are faced with discrimination. It is important as an educational tool so we can teach would-be discriminators that they shouldn't discriminate against us. And it is an important empowerment tool so that LGBT people know they don't have to take it. They don't have to be fired. They don't have to be thrown out of their home. This is such an important thing. It is too late for India. And India was, by the way, at least the 10th transgender woman, low-income transgender woman of color murdered this year. This is really important for those of us who are still here. And I'm just really honored to be here so that maybe we can help people get regular jobs and feel safe in school. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mara. This bill has been supported, and I don't just mean by co-sponsorship, but the active support of the co-chairs of the LGBT Equality Caucus, and the chair and most senior member of it is Jared Polis, who's been in this fight for a very long time. I'd like to invite him now to come forward.
Well, I think the indication of the number of speakers as well as their passion is an indication of both the need for this bill as well as the great dedication that the men and women who have spoken have to seeing it passed. I particularly want to thank Representative Cicilline and Senator Merkley for their sponsorship and really taking this to the stage where it's a piece of legislation that all of our legislative co-sponsors in both chambers can be proud of. The principle behind the Equality Act is very simple. Discrimination is wrong, no matter what form it takes, no matter who it targets. That's a principle that's core to our American identities. We see it validated in public opinion polls and the way we treat our friends and neighbors. It's apparent in the outpouring of joy and celebration we witnessed after the Supreme Court's historic marriage equality ruling last month. But our laws haven't caught up with our values. It's still legal in 31 states to fire someone just because they're gay or transgender. Same-sex couples in 28 states have no recourse if their landlord evicts them from their home just because they're gay or transgender. And only 14 states have laws that prohibit discrimination against LGBT kids in schools. It's not a theoretical concern. The stories you've heard today are repeated far too many times across our great country. That's why this group of legislators before you has chosen to act and bring forward the Equality Bill. The Equality Bill would address the issues that our speakers have raised and others across the country to make sure that no LGBT American is fired or turned away from a doctor or told they're not wanted in their neighborhood. And it gives them a recourse to ensure that that doesn't happen. We're better than that as a nation, and it's time we showed it. We're a nation that prides ourselves on our commitment to equality. So let's pass the Equality Act and put an end to legal discrimination against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people across these great United States. Thank you. Another leader and co-chair of our Equality Caucus, Mark Pocan from the great state of Wisconsin.
Thank you. It's a real honor to be here with my colleagues and friends supporting the Equality Act. We have had so much to celebrate in terms of equality in really a relatively short amount of time. In 2006, I remember in my state of Wisconsin, I was serving in our state legislature, we passed a constitutional amendment putting hate in our Constitution, defining marriage between a man and woman. And 2 weeks later, my husband and I flew to Toronto, Canada to get married, to recognize our love and commitment to each other. But when I got home, the state of Wisconsin wouldn't recognize that commitment. But I was fortunate because in 1983, in Wisconsin, signed into law by a Republican governor, was the first provision for employment to ensure non-discrimination, albeit only for gays and lesbians at the time. I at least had that protection, and other people in Wisconsin had that protection. Fast forward to today, every single state in the country, we now have marriage equality. Some say thanks to the Supreme Court. I say thanks to the Constitution. We have that right. But in the majority of states, you can still be fired simply for who you love. You can come home from your wedding, and your wedding gift can be an employment pink slip or a rental eviction. This is not what this country stands for. This is not where the people of this country believe we should be. Equality means equality across the board, and we have to remember it's not just about marriage. The fight is not over, and I am so proud to be with everyone here today to support the Equality Act. And next, I would like to introduce, because we're told votes are coming up, another co-chair of the Equality Caucus, Representative Sean Patrick Maloney from New York.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Well, I should say that I am I'm so proud to stand here with all the folks who've spoken, and I want to just say I'm the first openly gay person ever elected to Congress from the state of New York. That's an employment interview. And to be the person who's been hired, notwithstanding my sexual orientation first, I think puts on me a special burden to speak up about these issues. But I'll have to tell you, in my short time in Congress, one of the most remarkable things I did is bring my 3 children along with me at some of the best moments. And by far the most inspiring was the trip to Selma, Alabama to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the original march by John Lewis and others across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. My 2 little girls came with me. And Peggy Wallace, who's the daughter of Governor George Wallace, came on the trip. And she gave a very moving speech one morning in front of the state capitol in Montgomery. And she said that she had taken her son, to the Martin Luther King Center in Atlanta. And when they were looking at the exhibits, which included her father, that her own son had said to her, "Why did Grandpa do those terrible things to those people?" And she said, "I don't know. I never asked him. But it's up to you and me to make it right." And I want to say that we stand here with our arms open to those who oppose this, to the leadership that will block it, and to those who aren't ready for this. But they should know that the day is coming when their child, when their grandchild will look at them and ask the question, where were you when it came to the Equality Act? Were you standing in the doorway, or were you opening the door? We want them to join us. And I am so moved by the presence of so many straight allies today. We welcome you to this fight. And we need more of you. And to those who still oppose us, we ask you to look into your hearts and to look into the future, because history will judge very harshly your decision in the next few weeks about your position on this bill. There's still time to do the right thing. Join us, and let's move forward together. Thank you. And it is my great pleasure to introduce my fellow co-chair of the Equality Caucus, Mark Takano.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I was on the steps of the Supreme Court the day with the ruling for marriage equality for all of our country came down. And as the news that same-sex marriage bans were struck down, and as that news spread out throughout the crowd and people began to cheer, hug, and weep, the gay men's chorus behind me sang the national anthem. And as with the Windsor decision, I felt as if I were more a part of this country than ever, that my friends, LGBT friends, said, I feel more American and more patriotic than ever. But shortly after, it hit me that LGBT Americans who were finally going to be able to get married, that the wedding bouquet, the giant wedding bouquets that this court threw out to LGBT Americans all across the country, including the states, including the states where they couldn't get married before, that they were going to post their marriage pictures on Facebook, and the very next day face evictions, face firings from their jobs, and this simply is unacceptable. The LGBT Civil Rights Act that we propose is not just about protecting people from employment discrimination. It's also about housing, education, credit, public accommodations, and so much more. This court, in the soaring language of Justice Kennedy, talked about the dignity of all people, the dignity of LGBT Americans finally being recognized by the law in terms of marriage equality. Would not be, it is ironic that, that our dignity is recognized in that sense, and that they can't take away our dignity in that sense, but in 31 states, they can take away our job, they can take away, they can deny us services, and they can evict us from our homes. This is not acceptable. I am so pleased and proud at all of my colleagues who've joined us today, all the groups that have worked hard for this moment. Is certainly a very important one in the evolution of our country becoming a more perfect union. Thank you so much. And let me a special colleague of mine, Mike Honda, my I don't know what to say, my otosan.
That means older brother, but let me just start out with saying, what's wrong with this picture? Nothing. Right? Nothing. Look at this group. What's wrong with this picture? Nothing. And so I just want to make a couple of few points. We talked about 50 states. I want to include the territories. Territories are not exempt from this, so we want to be able to say LGBTQIA. It's going to be a long alphabet as we go along, understand who we are. And so I think that the last 15 years that I've been here, this country has grown. I'm reminded of that poem, Path Least Taken. 15 years ago, it was a path least taken. But we had Barney Frank, then Tammy, and then more and more people came forward, path least taken. We had LBJ, and we play on that now, huh? Now we got LGBT, QQIA. And so, as an openly grandfather of a transgender grandchild, it's important that this issue of safety is out there. I'm not going to worry about her growing up and being a strong person. 18 months, she says, I'm a girl. 3 years, she says, I'm a girl, my name is Melissa, and this is how you spell it. So she was insistent, persistent, and consistent. And these are the kinds of things we look for. And it's about Babe. It's about Melissa. It's about youngsters who are questioning. And this is the thing about our country and our Constitution. The framers said that in order to form a more perfect union, they knew they were not perfect. They knew that perfection had to be in the future. And this is what y'all did. You perfected the promise of the Constitution. You increased, nurtured, amplified, embraced more and more Americans so that the Constitution embraces all of us. Jerry Nadler, a few years ago, added same-gender binational couples as a definition in the immigration definition of families. Didn't know that. Path least taken. He's taken that. So there's a lot of people who have been partners and also leaders in this whole issue of defining who we are. And so as a grandfather of a transgender, I learned to look at my pronouns. Maybe we need more pronouns. I learned to not say, my grandchild was born a boy. My grandchild was designated that designation. And soon we will be going to a point where the child will designate themselves. Or we'll find science that will be able to say that gender is not a binary system where you have a man and a woman, boy or girl. It'll be a spectrum. And this is the progress that we're moving towards so that LGBTQIA and all those other things will become a thing of the past, and we start identifying according to our gender spectrum. And so this country is maturing. It's maturing fast. This country is going to catch up to the people that houses it. And so to all those out there who are questioning, question no more. The law is going to pass, and we're going to be protecting every man, woman, child, regardless of their gender identity and their sexuality, because those are different. And so I just want to thank all of you, and I thank the batteries on the cameras for sustaining itself all this long. Thank you very much.
We have 2 remaining speakers. Then the next speaker is someone who has been in this fight for equality for decades and a real champion for the LGBT community, Jerry Nadler of New York.
Well, thank you very much, David. I am very happy and glad and proud to be here today as we introduce or announce the introduction of the Equality Act, the latest, but not the last, step in continuing evolution in the United States of our understanding and our practice of what the Declaration of Independence meant when it said all men are created equal. When that was written 200 and whatever years ago, it was very narrowly understood. It meant white men, not women, not black people, not others. And it didn't even mean all white men, men of property. The history of this country, much of the history of this country can be understood as our expanding that definition to include more and more people till eventually we get to everybody. This introduction of this bill is another step and a major step in doing that. This country will not realize its goal, will not realize its destiny, will not realize its purpose until everyone, regardless of race, color, creed, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, you name it, is recognized and treated equally and not subject to any discrimination. And we are making progress. 6 years ago, when I introduced the bill to repeal DOMA to recognize same-sex marriages, people thought that was a wild step. And we certainly never believed that that would occur, that we would realize that ambition before we outlawed discrimination in housing and employment and public accommodations. We thought that would come first. It's our job now, it's our duty to make sure that that comes, and comes quickly. I want to congratulate and thank Congressman Cicilline, Congressman Lewis, Senator Baldwin, Senator Merkley, and everybody else involved in taking this next step. And I trust that before too long has passed, we will have accomplished that, and we can say that the United States stands more for liberty, more for equality, more for our purpose, and we're continuing the evolution of this country toward the great place it ought to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. As was mentioned by Leader Pelosi, there are some important provisions that provide additional protection to women in this bill, and one of the really important parts of the coalition has been the National Women's Law Center. And to close our press conference, I'd ask Fatima Ghost-Graves to come forward and thank her for accommodating the members who have to get off to vote.
Thank you so much, Congressman, and I just have to begin by saying my heart is so full after seeing the broad base of support here today. I'm Fatima Ghost-Graves with the National Women's Law Center, and I want to talk a little bit about why we are supporting this bill and why we think it is so critical for all. Last month's decision granting all couples the right to marry moved us one step closer to fulfilling the promise of everyone being equal under the law. But it also highlighted how much work there is to be done, both the work that you've heard about to confront the many ways our laws allow for LGBT individuals to be fired from jobs, to be evicted from homes, simply for who they are. But the Equality Act's historic and critical protections against discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, they are core to achieving that promise of equality, but it is also core that they are ensure that men and women can also enjoy the equal opportunity to succeed. The bill is historic in that it closes long-standing gaps in legal protections against sex discrimination. It will mean that when women experience harassment as customers in stores, on buses, on subways, that they will now have a remedy. It will mean that when chain pharmacies refuse to provide women with the prescriptions and healthcare that they need, that they will have a remedy. It will mean that car dealers and contractors and mechanics can't charge women more simply because they think they can get away with it. And it will mean that federal dollars will not be wasted on sex discrimination. There will be a remedy. So our long march towards justice and towards equality, it's sometimes uneven and it is not perfect, but this bill takes us another huge leap forward in our efforts to perfect our union. And the National Women's Law Center is very proud to support it today.
We've had a very long gathering already, but we have time to take one or two questions. And so if folks do have questions, we'll be glad to jump in.
Senator Merkley?
Yes.
You said at the beginning of the conference that the bill has bipartisan support. Were you able to get any Republican lawmakers to be with my co-sponsors?
Actually, I didn't say it has bipartisan support. All of our sponsors in the Senate, and I believe all of ours in the House, are Democrats. But the principles involved in this, the principles of non-discrimination, are broadly supported on both sides of the aisle, a tradition that is deeply embedded in both parties. And I look forward, just as we did with the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, to continuing to reach across the aisle, people become familiar with the bill. And let me clarify this. When people deeply feel that discrimination in employment is wrong, and we had many colleagues in the Senate stand up and vote for the Non-Discrimination Act, they also feel in their heart that discrimination in these other areas is wrong, that it's wrong to not get the same mortgage, that it's wrong to be thrown out of a restaurant or a movie theater. It's simply wrong to be denied fair housing. Let's see if anyone else has a question. Yes, ma'am.
I think it's clear it'll go to a number of committees, Judiciary, Education and Workforce for sure, and there may be a couple of other committees which we're happy to get to, but in the House it will at least go to those two committees.
And since the bill's just being introduced today, it hasn't been assigned in the Senate, but I believe it's going to go first to Judiciary.
And I have to excuse myself to get, oh, we'll do one more?
Okay, one more. Okay.
Do you anticipate any crossover, having seen 7 senators cross over for the SNDA bill, are you optimistic, even though you're saying now it's not a bipartisan bill, but are you optimistic that maybe some will actually cross over and vote with you on either the House or the Senate?
I think in the House for sure, we're going to work very hard to continue to make the case to our colleagues, both to get the remainder of the Democrats and Republicans on this bill, because I think at the core of this is a question about equality and about being against discrimination. And I think those are deeply held American values. I expect that our colleagues will hear from their constituents when they go home to talk about this, about the importance of it for the future of our country. So we will work hard. We have a really strong showing of support on the legislation on the first day of introduction, and we're going to continue over the next period of time making the case to our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to become part of this effort.
And in the Senate, where we did have bipartisan support on the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and we will continue in the same fashion. And this is a starting point in a journey of a comprehensive vision to end discrimination for our LGBT community in America. And this conversation is going to include our corporate community. For example, Dow Chemical and Levi Strauss, can I use the word endorsed? They have endorsed the bill, and we expect other companies to follow because there are many companies across America who understand that this represents the best in terms of every citizen in America and every employee have full rights under our national vision of equality and opportunity. And with that, we're going to conclude the press conference, but thank you so much for being here and hearing so many voices about this important journey for equality. Thank you.